fair if what happened? Aliana.
Every single person within the country voted.
Yes, it would be really good if everybody voted. Some countries have compulsory voting laws. In other words, not only do you not have to register to vote, you have to vote. And you have to fill out your ballot correctly. Like, it's a crime not to vote. Now, typically that's in a country that is a dictatorship where there's usually one candidate listed, so it's not very hard to decide who you're going to vote for. If you've ever watched John Oliver, he talked about how it's ironic that dictators tend to get exactly 97% of the vote. But yes, there are countries that voting is compulsory. In our country, voting is optional. Number one, you have to register to do it, and number two, you're not forced to do it. So it would be nice if everybody voted. Cheyenne, you had your hand up too. Gotcha. Ethan.
I feel like I don't really know how to word this, but every candidate that wants to run should have the same chances, like not having to do with money.
Okay.
Because certain candidates can pay more money to get an ad broadcasted on TV, which is a little more influence than the other candidates.
Absolutely.
So it kind of depends on money.
Like, how many of you had heard of that Evan guy running in Utah before I brought it up? Yeah, hardly anybody. He's only running ads in Utah, but he's running a lot of ads in Utah, and he has a good appeal to that particular state. And it happens that Utah, it's really easy to get on the presidential ballot. In Colorado, you actually have to get either a recognized political party's endorsement or 100,000 signatures to just appear with your name on the ballot. And kind of odd, in Colorado, if you write somebody in who is not an approved candidate, your ballot does not count. So if you vote for like the Cookie Monster in Colorado, you can do that in other states. Like Washington State, where I moved here from, you could vote for whoever you wanted to. Like, you wanted to write in anybody who's 35 or older and a citizen of the United States who was born in the United States, you could vote for them. In Colorado, all write-in candidates also must register. So if you vote for somebody who's not registered, your ballot doesn't count. Your ballot is voided because you voted for an illegal candidate. Other questions on that? So it's kind of odd. If like somebody got a lot of momentum in Colorado and they wrote them in, that would actually hurt that group because their ballots wouldn't be counted. Other things that would make an election fair. If somebody gets a majority of first place votes, should they win? Yes. If somebody beats everybody else head to head, should they win? Yeah. Yes. That's the two easy ones. The next two are kind of tricky. What we're going to talk about today is something called the fairness criteria of elections. I mentioned at the start, my goal for your learning in this is that if you ever run a political campaign, or if you are ever in charge of like a board of directors, that you would at least give pause and think to how we do elections. Today we're going to talk about how you decide who the winner is of that. The fairness criteria has 4 criterion to it. Criterion 1, don't forget criteria is plural, criterion is singular, and I have to remember how to spell it, criterion. Criteria number 1. If candidate, and we'll just call our candidate who's going to win. If candidate X gets a majority of first place votes, candidate X should be declared the winner. Kinsey, can I toss you this to throw in the trash? Criterion 2, the other easy one. Criterion 2, if a candidate in fact, let's go back. If candidate X is the winner of every head-to-head matchup, if candidate X is declared the winner of every head-to-head matchup, candidate X should be declared the winner. Which is kind of a dumb. If you beat everybody else head-to-head, you should win. If you get more than 50% of people's first place vote, you should win. I think that's pretty basic. Let's stop and check up. Questions on that? Okay, now we get into what ifs. Now we get in, the next two criteria has to do with like a runoff situation. Remember, in a lot of countries, if no one receives 50% plus one of the votes, which remember in America, all we count as first place votes, a runoff is held of some kind. Now, that could be a top two runoff, like a single runoff, like we talked about, like you just take the top two first place vote getters and run them off against each other. That could be a runoff where anybody who gets over a certain percent is allowed to be in the second election. Because you can imagine right now, if we ran homecoming like this, like you have to nominate somebody for homecoming, and anybody who gets a nomination gets to run. So there's 45 people running. You could imagine that somebody could get 6% and win if we decided to buy plurality, which is probably not a good idea because that 6% could just be like their one friend group and nobody else even likes that person. Same with the presidential candidate. Like you could imagine in Israel, if a Nazi party candidate ran and there was like 70 other candidates running, with their 2% that they get in the Nazi party, they could end up winning the election if they declared it in the first round. That would probably be not really a good outcome for Israel. Do you know why? Yes, because Israel is a country founded by the Jewish community, right? Having a Nazi leader would probably not work out real well for them. So these next two just have to do with if we have a runoff. Why? Because we wouldn't have a runoff if somebody got 50% plus one of the first place votes. We wouldn't even have a runoff in that case. If somebody wins head to head, we wouldn't even have a runoff. So this is just deciding the elections that there's not an obvious winner for. So criterion 3, good morning.
Morning.
Yep. Criterion 3. That's a cute hall pass. Criterion 3, if candidate X is declared the winner, if candidate X is declared the winner of a first election, and a second election is held, and some voters rank candidate X higher in the second election, candidate X should win the second election as well. I'll explain it. And Meg, if you want, I'll just hand this to you when I'm done with the sheet of paper. Okay, now I know you guys like learn PowerPoint math because basically everybody but me has PowerPoint math and they just read the slides to you. So here's what's on the PowerPoint, but here's where I'm going to explain it to you. So imagine this happens. We have everybody in this class running for president. I need 3 volunteers. We lower it down to Brenna, Ethan, and Claire in the second election. So imagine that Alex, we're going to make it awkward for you here. Imagine that in the first election, Alex picked Connor to win. But Connor's not in it anymore. So now he picks Claire to win. Was Claire ranked higher on his second ballot? Yes, because his first place vote is gone. So now he gets a new first place vote, which in this case, maybe he had Claire second and now she moves up to first because the person that he voted for first place is gone. So Claire moved up in some people's ballots. If she was declared the winner of the first election, she should also be declared the winner of the second election. So the first 2 criteria are kind of obvious. If you get a majority, you should obviously win. If you beat everybody else who's running head-to-head, you should win. The third and the fourth just have to do with runoffs. So if a first election is held, and for some reason Claire is declared the winner, and now people vote Claire for first that had her in second or third or fourth in the first one, she should still win. The third and the fourth one have to do with declaring a winner prematurely. And again, that gets down to like the Clinton-Perot-Bush election, where there were 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat running. Who was declared the winner of that one? Clinton, because obviously you don't know about President Perot, and President Bush lost to President Clinton. Clinton was declared the winner in an election that was prematurely decided. Because if they would have went, because nobody got a majority, nobody won head-to-head, but if there would have been a second election in which the third place candidate would have been eliminated and they would have ran head-to-head, whichever one of those 2, Perot or Bush, would have won. But because in our system, we declare the winner just based on first place votes, and you don't need a majority to win it, President Clinton won an election that probably was not favorable to the vast majority of the country. So it has to do with declaring a winner prematurely. So imagine this was your ballot. You know, you had Bush, Perot, Clinton. So Bush, Perot, Clinton. Clinton is declared the winner of the first election, but a second election is held. Bush is eliminated as a candidate. So now your ballot would read what? Perot, Clinton. So who was moved up in that one? Perot was moved up, right. Perot was moved up to first place. If Perot would have been declared the winner of the first one, he should have also been declared the winner of the second one. Clinton probably did not move up anybody's ballot, because if your ballot was Clinton, Bush, Perot, and Bush gets eliminated, now your ballot is still probably Clinton, Perot. So Clinton's in the same spot. And that's exactly what this is dealing with. And there are 2 or more candidates that have really similar viewpoints, to the point that they split the vote. Like what might happen in the House of Representatives if, like I mentioned, Utah goes to this independent candidate, New Mexico goes to the libertarian candidate, and neither one of them gets 271. It is possible that Hillary Clinton may win the election in a Republican House just because the Republicans split. If we put it down to a single runoff, undoubtedly whoever the Republican candidate would win, as long as all the Republicans voted for that candidate. Obviously more complicated than the first 2, but stop and check out. Questions on that? So if a runoff is held, that moves people up a voter's preference chart. Like there's 2 Republicans running, if there's 2 Republicans running, the Democrats declare the winner, and one of the Republicans moved up, the Democrats should still win. So in the Clinton-Bush-Perot thing, if a non-winning candidate moves up, that will, I said that. If a winning candidate moves up on the preference chart, they should still be declared the winner. So in other words, if your first place vote is eliminated, now your second place becomes your first place. If that person you had second was declared the winner, they should still win because they moved up your preference chart. They have a more favorable rating. They should not then lose. But again, this is all based on declaring a winner prematurely. Stop and check out. Questions on that? Everybody totally gets that. Yes, no, I don't know.
More or less, to
Not-
a certain extent.
More or less to a certain extent. Thank you. That was almost helpful. Almost. Sarcasm slowly. So again, if somebody's declared the winner and they move up a preference chart, they should still win. Moving up shouldn't hurt them. Moving up shouldn't hurt them. The fourth one, now we deal with again. So the fourth one, I'm going to underline up here what we copy. So all of that moves down and copies down to criterion 4. If you want to rewrite that, you can. I'm just going to put some quotations to say that we are quoting that first part. So if candidate X is declared the winner of the first election and the second election is held, in this particular one, and voters do not change their preference, and voters do not change their preference schedule, but a losing candidate drops out, X should still be declared the winner. Seems very similar to the first one. Ethan.
What if, on people's number ones, if there were like 4 people being interviewed or something, I don't know. It's like they had the 2 same number ones, and then
Okay.
and then below that it was for example, Hillary Trump and then Trump Hillary.
Yep.
There were 2 above them.
Yep.
And the person at the very top was removed
Okay.
for the second election.
Okay, so let's put this a little more solid. So we got Ethan Neese, Hillary, and Trump running. Yes.
Ethan Neese, Trump, and Hillary
Okay.
on the second column.
Okay.
And then Ethan Neese is suddenly out.
Mm-hmm.
They found the video online. How?
About the ovens, yes.
Yes. Who would win?
It depends on how many people voted that way. If there's only 2 people voting and that's how they voted, they tie 50-50. Bad news, we'd have to have Trump and Hillary do a rock, paper, scissors, and you can imagine those candidates going nuts about how unfair that would be. Like, you could imagine Fox News and CNN covering, what should Hillary, rock or scissors? Which one should Hillary go with? What's the probability? You know, and then they're like digging up all these old videotapes of them playing rock, paper, scissors in the past. Oh. There's like math commentators on Fox News talking about what they should play. You can imagine too. Are they going to go on 3? Are they going to go on shoot? Oh. Well, if it was for the presidency, and then what are they going to do? 2 out of 3, 3 out of 5?
Keep going.
Flip a coin, but then what kind of coin does it? Like, you know, let's say Hillary says, I'm going to use a 1968 penny. Well, in 1968, copper was really expensive, so they used cheaper metal alloys to make pennies that year. By the way, if you ever want to mess with somebody's head, not joking. Remember, I was trying to show you that Plinko example, but I couldn't get the IT department to okay it. Suddenly, the guy's name is Paul Joyce. First day of the stats, so I took a stats theory class from him. He hands everybody in the room a penny. And they said, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to put it on and just flick it. Okay, well, he happened to have a 1968 penny. And he said, okay, go home tonight, every one of you, 100 times, we're going to put the data on the board. And of course, we're thinking, oh, he just wants some real life data for it. No, I go home and flick it. It's like 95 heads, 5 tails. Why? And of course, because I'm a mathematician, I think, okay, that's just a weird coincidence. But I don't want to go to class and say that. Like, I'm going to look like an idiot when I get 95 heads. Like, people are going to be like, oh, no, you didn't. So, of course, I do it more. And what keeps happening? It's like almost always heads. Okay, so then I call up other people in the class. It's almost always heads for them too. Why? Told you they used a different metal alloy. Forrest.
Because the head's end will be heavier, and the tail's end will be heavier.
There you go. Right, they used this metal alloy that didn't evenly distribute through the penny. So most of the weight's at the bottom. So when you flick it, now when you go like this, that it actually doesn't change the probability. It's almost 50-50 still. But when you flick it, which one almost always ends up on the bottom? The heavier side, right. So the tails ends up on the bottom, the heads ends up on the top. So you almost always get head. So of course he comes back the next day and he's like, okay, volunteers who wants to come up and put their data in? Nobody raises their hand. 0 is like, you guys didn't do the project? And somebody raises their hand and they're like, I got heads like almost every time. He's like, oh, that's interesting. And then somebody else did, and he's like shaking his head. And of course, he's just totally playing with us. But yeah, imagine what coin would they use? Like, how do we make sure it's fair? Ooh. And who would get to pick? Like, who would get to choose heads or tails? Ooh.
You have to do rock, paper, scissors.
I'm just throwing this out there, but just from the debates, I have a feeling like if they did rock, paper, scissors, whoever lost would like go crazy on the stage. Yeah. Just start screaming it was rigged and yeah, I just have a feeling like, you know. Yeah, that would, in fact, somebody should suggest that for the third debate. They have to go play rock, paper, scissors to see who gets to go first. That would be really engaging television.
Hillary would make her faces and she also
If the acting doesn't work out for you, being a Hillary Clinton impersonator could work out for you. You better hope she gets elected, though, because nobody wants to see an impression of the losing candidate. Okay, so let's talk real quick. Okay, criterion 4. Criterion 4, again, has to do with a runoff, where a candidate drops out. Criterion 3 has to do with somebody changing their mind. So let's use an example. Let's say that, let's go back to, who do I have as my three? Brenna, Ethan, Claire. So let's pretend that, I don't know, let's pick on Zach. Zach decides he's going to go Ethan, Brenna, Claire. And then he sees some video on the internet about comments about people sticking dead bodies in ovens. And he's like, hey guys, I really want to change my mind on this election. Can we re-vote? And suddenly he changes his mind and votes Brenna, Claire, and Ethan last. Well, if Brenna is declared the winner of the first election and Zach ranks her higher in the second election, who should win that election? Brenna, right. Would it make sense if suddenly, and this, you could imagine like Zach tried to figure this out and Ethan coaching him into this. So imagine that Brenna wins. But he looks at all the preference schedules and he said, wait a minute, if I voted for Brenna in this pairwise comparison, now suddenly Ethan would win that pairwise comparison and Ethan would be declared the winner. So imagine like in the head-to-head of Claire versus Brenna, if Zach changes his schedule to vote Brenna higher, suddenly she ends up winning the pairwise comparison. Therefore, Ethan is declared the winner. That doesn't make sense. That's not fair. So if Zach changes his preference schedule, changes his mind to vote Brenna higher, so instead of Ethan, Brenna, Claire, she votes Brenna, Claire, Ethan. If Brenna was declared the winner of the first one, Brenna should still win the second one. That might be a better example. So if a winning candidate in a second election, somebody changes their mind and ranks that winning candidate higher, they should still win that election. Comprende? The second one is if, okay, so we got Ethan, Brenna, and Claire. So Ethan drops out, Brenna wins the first one, but when Ethan drops out, all of his voters go over to Claire and she's declared the winner of the second one. That's also not fair. That really says that she shouldn't have been declared the winner of the first one. Criterion 1 and 2 just have to do with common sense and making sure an election, a winner is declared that makes sense. Criterion 3 and 4 have to do with if a runoff is held and a candidate is prematurely declared the winner, that candidate probably shouldn't have been declared the winner in the first place. And again, that goes to the Clinton, Bush, Perot presidency. If either one of Bush or Perot would have dropped out, the other one would have been the president, but the Republicans couldn't get Perot to drop out, hence Clinton won the presidency. I mean, Ross Perot really handed the presidency to Bill Clinton. Same with Al Gore and who's the Green Party candidate that year? The car guy. Al Gore, George W. Bush, and can't think of his name off the top of my head. What's that?
I know you're talking.
Yes, he really
He won like
cost
100%.
Florida for Gore. If he would have dropped out, Gore would have won Florida. Gore would have been the president. But
Or one total votes.
Gore did, yeah. But he didn't get a majority. He only got a plurality. What is that guy's name? I can even see his face, but I can't think of it. Let's look it up real quick. Green Party. Gore, Bush. Ralph Nader. I should have known that one. Ralph Nader really handed the election to George Bush that year. So it kind of canceled out the 1992 election that Bush handed to Clinton. So, all right, yes.
Someone's name was Ralph.
Ralph Nader was a Green Party candidate who kind of ran consecutively through the 80s and the 90s. He was the first one that really came out and said that cars may not be, all driving cars may not really be good for our long-term health. And in the 80s and the 90s, people were like, no, what are you talking about? Cars are awesome. And then people started looking outside and seeing brown clouds and being like, huh. But he was the first one that really brought that to a nationwide, audience, or had credibility enough to bring it to a larger audience. Let's pick on an example, though. I need 3 candidates here. 3 candidates. Let's go for Cheyenne. That works out really nice. And, nope, I need a B. Bass, Cheyenne.
Did you say my last name?
Yep, because I need a B. Because it's really easy for me to consider these when I just have ABC, because then it's easy for me. I need an A, though. Alex, sweet. Sorry for the rest of you. Your names just didn't fit what I needed. It's harder for me to do the math when it's like R, C, K off the top of my head. Okay, so let's run an election. Let's have, what should we do for this one? What's that? No, I can't. I got to rig this so something happens, Ethan. Hello. You got to rig it. In fact, I'm trying to think who's going to win this. Okay. No, we're not going to. Okay, so here's some preference schedules. So let's go CBA first. And let's go, what's another combination? ACB. Let's go for CAB. And let's go for BAC. And let's see, how many do I need for this to work out? I will need 9 in the first column, 13 in the second column. It's a difference of 4, so I need 5 in this column, and 14, so I need 11 in this column. Well, because you just happen to be in the last column. Sorry. Bass, I have a feeling like this is better for Alex more than anybody anyways. Let's take a peek. Why am I so popular today? Let's take a peek. What should we decide this by? Let's decide by a single runoff. Who wins? Let's decide who wins this by a single runoff, and then we will decide which of the 4 fairness criteria is violated. Yep. Which of the 4 fairness criteria is violated? So real quick, on your own or with the person sitting next to you, run a single runoff. And for that, that's it right now. For that, that is it right now. Run a single runoff. Ready, set, math. Yes, some time to work stuff. And then these are for 7th and 8th period. Not everybody's turned this in yet. Quadratic formula is one of them, you complement them together. The answers are on the back. You want to check back. All right, single runoff. Let's call in a victim here. Henry Young, you looked up at the right time. Henry, who drops out in a single runoff? No. Hold on. Let's count first place votes. ABC. Cheyenne, he's trying to get rid of you. He's really trying to be unfair. How many first place votes does A have? 13. How many does B have? 11. How many does C have? 14. All right. Who's the lowest in that one? Yeah, sorry, Bass. This is not made up to be an actual election. I just made numbers work so something. What's that? Sorry. Yeah, I just made it so the numbers worked. When you rig an election, you have to rig it in the right way for the math, not the person. Okay, so we look at Bass's votes. If she's gone, yes, you could actually go and say, yes, this election was rigged, because it was. Those 11 first place votes go to who then? Alex, right. So plus 11. And who wins? Yep, 24. So who's declared the winner by a single runoff? Alex, right. So which one of the 4 fairness criteria does that have to do with? 1, 2, 3, or 4? 4. Because what happened? A losing candidate out. Alex gets all of those votes. Therefore, Alex is declared the winner. So now we're going to look at which one of the 4 fairness criteria it violates. Now, look at the 4. Which one of those is going to be the most work? Which one of those 4 is going to be the most work? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Well, of the 4 fairness criteria, which one of those 4 is going to be the most work to figure out? Number 2, right? Because the pairwise comparison is, yeah, a lot of work. Because you got to run everybody versus everybody else. So we avoid that one at all costs and just make sure we can figure out the other 3 first. So now we're trying to decide: is this election fair? Is this election fair?
No,
Yes.
not.
Well, we'll see. First off, is any candidate get a majority of first place votes? No, they do not. They do not get a majority of first place votes. So it doesn't violate that, because C has the most first place votes, but is 14 a majority here? No, not even close. So it doesn't violate criterion number 1. Criterion number 2 we're going to skip because it's a lot of work at this point. Criterion number 3, did any of the voters change their mind? No, we have no idea if they did or not, so we can't say that. Criterion 4, did a losing candidate drop out and another candidate be declared the winner? Well, we couldn't declare a winner in this because there was a majority, therefore nobody dropped out yet, so we have to check a pairwise comparison on this one. With that being said, a pairwise comparison, we go back to the original data chart, and we're going to run A versus B, A versus C, and C versus B. And the person who wins is the person who has the best, or the most number of head-to-head wins. So again, what are we doing in this section? We're making sure an election is fair. If it's election fair, it needs to meet all 4 of those criteria. If somebody gets a majority, they win. If somebody wins every head-to-head, they win. If people change their mind and rank a winner higher, they should still win. And if a losing candidate drops out, the candidate that won the first one should still win. So in other words, a losing candidate should not shift the vote so that somebody else is then declared the winner. Ethan.
Why did you go to the other method?
Well, because they have nothing to do with fairness. Point system is never fair because we have no idea. Like if we have you 3 running, Alex, Cheyenne, Bass, and we look at that first category of voters, do they like Cheyenne 3 times as much as they like Alex? Because if we did a board account, there's going to be 3 points for first, 2 points for second, 1 point for third. Do they like Cheyenne 3 times as much as they like Alex?
You don't know.
Yes or no? We have no idea, right? We have no idea how much more they like one more than the other, so it's impossible to declare fairness by a board account. If we gave you 10 points and you got to distribute them on how much you like the candidates, then a count could be valid, but a lot of people won't vote that way. If they like Alex for first place, they'll more than likely give Alex all 10 points. Why? Because they want him to win. Other questions? All right, let's run a pairwise comparison. So let's go for A versus B. Who gets the first column? B. A versus B. A. A versus B. A versus B. Okay, now Bass, you thought it was unfair, but maybe it isn't. Who wins that one? Yeah, Bass wins. So let's count our wins here. A, B, C. Okay. Hold on, Bass. Don't get too excited yet. Okay. So let's look at A now, because who did we declare the winner? We declared A the winner by a single runoff. If A is declared the winner by a single runoff, they need to not lose every head-to-head. So let's go over here. A versus C. Who wins the first column? Who wins the first column? A versus C. C. Who wins the second column? Who wins? Put that in the wrong one. 9, 13. 9, yes. 13, yes. Who wins this column? And who wins this column? A. Who wins this one? Oh, sorry, 24 to 14. So A wins that one. All right. So if Bass wins this one, the election was unfair. If Bass doesn't, we have no fairness to grow on. So let's look. Who wins the first column? Who wins the second column? Who wins the third column? And who wins the fourth column? And who wins this one? C, right.
What an unfair election. How is it?
Yeah, I didn't know.
What's that?
What do you do in an unfair election?
In an unfair election, you shouldn't have declared a winner. That becomes the criterion. What's that? You can hold the second election with the losing candidate dropping out. But like the Perot, and again, this is the ideal example, the Perot, Bush, Clinton example, if either Bush or Clinton, or either Bush or Perot would have dropped out, the other one would have won. But because neither one of them dropped out and Clinton was declared the winner without a majority, that election was unfair because if either one of the 2 losing candidates would have dropped out, that other person would have shifted. So imagine, let's go back to the example of Claire, Brenna, Ethan. Let us pretend that instead of Ethan dropping out, that Claire drops out. And it turns out that Brenna and Claire split the girls' vote, but all the boys voted for Ethan. Where more than likely are Claire's vote's going to go to? To Brenna, right. And if there's more girls in the room than boys, Brenna may end up winning off of a single runoff, like Ethan could have been declared the winner in a first election. Comprende? Claire?
So because they all put a pairwise, everybody gives a 3-way tie,
Yep.
does that mean that it's not fair?
No, this is a fair election. This is a fair election because there's no winner by majority. We didn't declare it. If the losing candidate dropped out, that didn't affect anything because there was no winner declared before that. And then because in a pairwise comparison, nobody won every head-to-head matchup, this election was fair. Well, by single runoff, Alex wins. Who actually wins this one? Like, if you had to pick a winner, who wins it?
C.
C? Why?
Well, because like in the last one, it was A versus C.
Mm-hmm.
C won 3 times.
3 times? Oh, they won 3 of the 4 splits.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else? There's no winner declared. When it's a 3-way tie in a pairwise comparison, there's no winner. So, like I said, this is really, there's nothing new in this section. There's no new method. There's just a way to check to see if an election is fair. An election is fair if somebody wins by the majority, they should win, regardless. If they win every head-to-head matchup in a pairwise comparison. So in other words, if this would have happened, let's say that these two would have switched and Bass would have won that one, she would have won every head-to-head matchup. She should have been declared the winner.
Wait, if I won that, I would win.
If you would have won this one, yeah, you would have won the whole thing. Or you should have won the whole thing, because you basically, if we would have ran you one-on-one against every candidate, you would have beat everybody one-on-one, and you should be declared the winner. Or if somebody changes their mind and ranks the winner higher, they should still win. The only way that really ends up affecting the math is if you're declared the winner, somebody changes their preference schedule, which puts a different pair of people in a single runoff, and you can't beat that other person in the single runoff. That's where the fairness criteria is violated. So in other words, if you win this one, but somebody changes their mind that ends up instead of A versus C, it's A versus B, and B beats A head-to-head, that would be a violation of the fairness criteria. So if somebody changed their mind here that ended up with these two in the final instead of these two in the final, and suddenly Bass wins in that, that would be a violation of the fairness criteria. But I'm talking too much. Ethan.
Okay, I missed it, but if the fairness criteria is violated, what happens?
Can you say that again?
If the fairness criteria is violated, then what happens?
Then the election was unfair, and that person should not have been declared the winner.
But they still are declared the winner?
And that's where, okay, so that goes to the bigger picture of giving pause. Okay, so let's say we declare the winner of this election just by first place votes. And I hate to talk for this long, but I do need your attention for this one real quick. So in America, who wins this election? Cheyenne. Is there any doubt that Cheyenne's going to win this election? No. But here's the weird thing that happens. If Bass drops out, who ends up winning? Alex does, right? Because in a single runoff, who wins with those two head-to-head? Alex does. So in America, Cheyenne wins this election. And good news, we don't even, in fact, this is all we see in America. Just who you voted for first, nothing else. So Cheyenne would be declared the winner. But if Bass drops out, now suddenly Alex wins. That's a violation of the fairness criteria because, and again, going back, basically Cheyenne shouldn't have been declared the winner in the first place. She didn't have a majority, but if by plurality, she's declared the winner. And again, in America, that's all we look at. So we declare Cheyenne the winner, and on election day, in fact, she'd win by a lot. That's not true. She'd win by 1. That would be unfair. It's basically cautioning you. You shouldn't declare a winner without a majority. If there isn't a majority, you should have candidates dropping out until there is. Or, like we will talk about on Thursday, maybe. Thursday, I want to do apportionment. Yeah, we'll talk about that next Tuesday. As we talk about next Tuesday, we'll talk about approval voting. And approval voting is something that express not only who do you like, but who do you approve of. Like, let's go back to Ethan, Brenna, Claire. If I said, okay, who do you vote for class president? Who would you approve of? If nobody wins a majority of who's your first choice, then you go to approval, and whoever most people approve of wins. That gets you towards more of a compromised candidate, because then you're not just trying to win people, but you're also trying to make sure they approve of you. So instead of dividing the vote, they would be trying to unite people in a vote, and that typically ends up with a better overall outcome. Ethan.
So the U.S., if no one wins by plurality,
U.S., somebody wins. The U.S. does not have a majority election state. So in other words, let's go to the poll from Utah yesterday, just because it's math and it's fascinating right now. So McCollum has 37%, Hillary has 30%, and Trump is at 20. It's either 25 or 29. Okay, who's going to win every single electoral vote from Utah? McCollum, right. He's going to win. It does not matter in the United States if he has a majority or not. Because he has more votes than anybody else in that state, he will win that state. Now, if he drops out, who do you think his votes are going to? they're probably largely going to Trump. But that's not how we do it in the US. And it really will be unfair, because if he didn't get a majority, if he dropped out, Trump would win the state. That's not fair to Trump that he doesn't win, but that's how we decide elections in the United States. We only care about first place votes, and we only care about who gets the most. Our presidential elections are easily decided by somebody who doesn't get a majority, because our election system was designed to only have 2 candidates. And if you only have 2 candidates, somebody will get a majority unless they're tied. It is not designed for a 3-candidate system or even a 5-candidate system. That was a lot of talking by me today. Stop and check if I have questions on that. So let me reiterate. We're talking today about fairness. This election would violate the fairness criteria if you declared Cheyenne the winner by just number of first place votes. Why? Because she doesn't win by single runoff. If Bass drops out, somebody else wins this election. But it would hold for this one because nobody wins every head-to-head pairwise comparison. Stop and check out. Questions on that? Okay, what's coming up? Thursday, don't forget, we are on a Thursday schedule. We are going to talk about apportionment on Thursday. I will have you do a little project first. What is apportionment? Is deciding how you are going to divide limited resources. So an example of an apportionment problem is you are in charge of a company. This company has different divisions. The divisions of the company are like, you have manufacturing, you have accounting, you have human resources, you have shipping, you have receiving, you have sales, but you only get 10 supervisors. How many supervisors should each division get? Because it's hard to split somebody who's like a shipping supervisor and a human resources supervisor. Why? Because it's hard to find somebody who would be a really good supervisor for both. So how do you break up those resources? Again, just like elections, there isn't a right answer. There's no right way to run an election. There are fair ways and unfair ways, but there's no right way. And if you haven't seen, the theme of the first part of this class is making decisions when there is not a correct answer. There's very rarely a correct answer in stat. And if it is, it's so obvious, why would they hire you to do it? Like if you hold an election and 95% of people vote for somebody, they're not going to pay somebody to think who should win this election. It's obvious who should win. But when there is no right answer, when it's close, when there's no clear criterion, that's when we use math to make decisions. Very rarely will you be paid to do something that has an X in it, because X is equal to something. Most of what people get paid to do math is in these types of situations when there is no right answer and you have to use math to justify the answer you came up with, as opposed to getting the correct answer. And it's sad when people don't take FST because they probably go their entire high school career and think that math is all about the one answer, which it really isn't. Questions on that?